Hey, what's up everyone? And today we're going to finish off this Horde feedback series with arguably one of the most controversial changes made to the mode. As the title implies, that's the class-locked characters. I think that everyone knows that I'm against this change, but I'm at least going to attempt to look at this issue from both sides. Let's begin with why we have class-locked characters in the first place. I'll preface with saying that I can't say for sure what TC was thinking, but based on the various bits of information that I've pieced together from tweets or streams, these are what I believe to be the reasoning. I believe it all stems from fan feedback. Some disliked the class system in Gears 4, but I believe the majority enjoyed it. If my Gears 4 feedback panels are any indication, I'd say that not only did fans enjoy it, but they wanted more out of the class system. We not only wanted more classes, but we wanted deeper classes. We wanted classes with abilities and things that made them stand out. Well, it kinda looks like TC made this happen. We not only have more classes, but they also have more personality and individuality. But we get back to the question at hand. Why are these class locked to a single character? Well, let's think about this a year or so after launch. Let's say that we now have 20 different classes to choose from. In an ideal world, people will be able to easily identify players' role at a glance. And that brings us to the good aspects of this system. I see 3 key positive aspects that result from class locks. First off is the fact that you can easily identify and communicate with teammates. At a glance, you instantly know who is who, what role they play, and what their abilities are. To be fair, this was pretty easy to figure out in Gears 4, and I didn't have any issues, but we only had 5 classes, and they were all pretty unique. As more classes get added, many are likely to overlap, and the differences will become less and less apparent. Combine this with the fact that each class would need to have its own way to easily distinguish it with its counterparts, and yeah, it gets overwhelming pretty quickly. By having it set up with heroes, we learn to associate abilities and performance with a character rather than a symbol. By putting a face to it, it makes a huge difference subconsciously. People will much more easily remember the difference between Del and Cat versus the difference between an Engineer Symbol 1 and Engineer Symbol 2, or whatever. And that brings us to the second key difference. Classes now have more personality. JD cards that reflect who he is as a person, like his Daddy's Boy card, for example. Honestly, I'd say they didn't take this whole personality and characteristic type thing far enough. I'd love to see some of the characters actually have more health, but be slower or deal more damage, or something like that. I'll hit on that more later. The key here, though, is personality. This is what enables TC to make classes much deeper. The third key aspect of having class-locked characters is simply balance. We all know the various exploits that existed in Gears 4 by having duplicate classes. Well, that actually limited the Coalition in what they could do for the mode. Whatever they did, they needed to make sure that people couldn't exploit it. By locking us to one of each hero, they've basically taken that ability away from the fans. It limits us, but it helps them, and in theory, will make things more enjoyable for us. Take this for example. If we were allowed to have 3 JDs on the field, 1 Del, and 1 Jack, how easily could you take out a carrier? Yeah, basically immediately. In order to account for that, the Coalition would need to increase the boss's health to make it more reasonable. But wait, now any team that only has 1 JD is going to be at a crazy disadvantage, and it's going to take forever to kill that bullet sponge. By adding this restriction to the character count, the Coalition can better predict the performance of players, thus allowing them to keep things more well-rounded and balanced overall. As you can clearly see from the complaints though, not everything is good. I've seen 3 main complaints rise up from the community as a result of this class-locked system. The most prominent has been people complaining about wanting to play as a class that fits their playstyle, but also wanting to play as a character that they enjoy. The next most common complaint is that people want to play a certain class, but somebody else has already called dibs, so they're forced to play something else. And the last complaint, which is way overlooked in my opinion, is that it limits the frequency in which new characters are added to the game. Let's look at each of these in more detail. First up was the people who want to play a certain class, but not the character associated with that class. Personally, this doesn't bother me. I usually try to pick a character that fits the class, and in this case, the Coalition just made my job easier. I know a lot of people, though, who had their go-to characters for many games now, and all of a sudden they either need to give up on that character, or play a class that they may not enjoy. I can't say that I necessarily feel the same way, but I totally understand why these people would be pissed off. Next up is one that I do feel affects me a bit, and that's the no duplicates thing. I see this hit us in 2 main ways. Most prominently, people are now fighting over who gets what class. I mean, this was kind of a problem in Gears 4 when multiple people wanted to be a scout or something, but luckily in Gears 4, that may have just put people at a disadvantage if people disagreed. But hey, at least you could play what you wanted. Another problem that this introduces is the fact that when in matchmaking custom lobbies, you may have an instance where a level 1 Jack, for example, could beat out a level 17 Jack, thus hindering the team's capability. That's no fun for anyone. The other aspect is that it removes the ability to do some of what I considered the fun runs. I used to enjoy doing something like an all-scout run, or just general things that were a fun challenge, and are now simply gone. While that does concern me a little bit, I'd say this next change is probably way too overlooked, and that's the limited character roster. No, not just the Horde roster, but think about versus as well. With this new hero system, the Coalition can't just release new characters as soon as they're ready to go in multiplayer. They now need to not only wait until the character's ready to go, but they also need to wait until they flesh out all of the Horde and Escape class stuff. It really sucks. So now that we've covered the background, some of the good aspects, and some of the bad aspects, what can we do? Well, let's look at this in parts. The first one is easy. I feel that new characters should be released as soon as they're ready for multiplayer. Just get them in versus and expand out that roster. Then add them to Horde and Escape whenever you're ready. Well, sort of. And that's the next task, which is separating class from character. This is a pretty significant change. To start with, we have cards that are character specific. Something like JD's Daddy's Boy card that I mentioned earlier. Obviously that would need to get updated. I don't necessarily think that update would be that difficult, it's just changing the name of the card to make it reflect a class rather than a character. On top of that though, there's the whole selection process. You would need to be able to select your character, and then your class. Well, actually with how TC has it set up now, it's selecting your character, like Marcus, Foz, and Kate, and then I assume you would select your role, like Engineer, Heavy, or Support, and then you would select your class, or subclass as I like to call it, like Heavy Hitter or Living Legend, and basically that's what specifies what your ultimate and your cards are. We've had plenty of people in the community discuss this concept of using kits. I want to play as JD, but I want to use Dell's kit. I mean, that kind of accomplishes the same thing as what I proposed. It's much easier, and has the end same result on gameplay, but it's basically putting a band-aid on the problem. I'd propose that they revamp the system and do a proper fix rather than a band-aid. Sounds easy, but I assume it's quite difficult. Then even on top of that we have the issue of identifying people. Arguably one of the biggest advantages of the class-locked characters is how easily you can identify teammates. If we unlock them, we'll have to do something, right? There's no denying that locking them is the most clear-cut way to solve this issue, but I'd argue that the ends justify the means when it comes to unlocking them. Let's set up a system of roles and subclasses. Make those icons visible to the players. It's more difficult, but eventually people will learn what's what. Oh, and honestly, if the Coalition doesn't want to do this, and they actually are willing to do the whole kit thing because that's easier, I'm not opposed to them just allowing people to use kits in private matches. It gives no advantage. There's no need to restrict anything. If people want to play in private and use any character with a certain class, I see no reason to restrict that. And now for the last change, and that's to the duplicate character system. I'm also going to add that with this proposal for the duplicate character system, it doesn't even limit it to a case where things are unlocked. Like, these suggestions I'm about to say here, I believe could and should be implemented regardless of the Coalition's stance on class locks. Let's start with the allowance of duplicates. In some recent discussion from Ryan, it seems to indicate that they might be allowing 1 or 2 duplicates in a lobby in the future. That would be nice, and honestly would appease most people's issues. To go a step further, I would propose that in private matches you have the option to allow as many duplicates as you want. Perhaps they can lower the XP gains, or they can disable the ability to earn certain achievements, but overall it would give this fun option for people who want to play it. I don't think they need to go as far as to disable all medals and all achievements and all XP gains if you have duplicate characters. I think some of it's still fair to keep in there, but I would be fine with removing some of it. Probably the most important change that I'd propose though is the way that you select your characters in the lobby. I would propose that if there are duplicates, the player with the higher level character gets priority. It would then force any lower level person to change. For example, let's say I'm in a lobby with a level 12 Jack equipped. If you came in here and selected a level 15 Jack, it will auto-change me to the next available character. But again, this is while we're still in the lobby. If I try to select Jack again, it won't let me, because yours is higher. If you then move off to something other than Jack, the slot's now available, so I can move in and take it if I want. This would not only ensure that the higher level character gets priority, but it clearly identifies in the lobby and gives people time to change. Right now, it sucks when people both load in as Jack and one gets auto-changed, and then they're probably just going to quit right away anyways. Oh, and perhaps an even simpler method is to just go back to the approach of some hero shooters. You load in, select a character, first come, first serve, gray out any character options that's not available, and move on. So, speaking of hero shooters, I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up. It really feels like someone at the Coalition was starting to enjoy some hero shooters, and then decided that they wanted Gears to be one as well. Class lock characters and perks really reflect that in my opinion. As I've said before, I've gotten a bit bored of Horde, so maybe this isn't the best feedback. But in my opinion, if we're gonna make a mode that's a hero shooter, let's go all in on it. Escape works pretty well now because it's new. A mode that's based around being a hero shooter could work really well in Gears, I'm not gonna deny that. But only if it was new. I mean, look at Overrun and Judgment. Nobody complained about the class locks in there. I feel that this hero shooter shift that was made was just a nudge instead of going all in, and because of that, it suffered. But at the same time, they're trying to nudge an established mode in this direction, so of course it's going to be met with angry people. If you want something new, make something new. And yeah, I know I may be sending mixed messages in this video, but that's for a reason. There is no right answer. These are all just my thoughts and the way I see things. I know many people probably agree, but there's also probably plenty that disagree. Be sure to let me know what your personal thoughts are on class lock characters. Hit me up on Twitter and Reddit, or even down in the comments. I'm going to finish off with 2 quick notes here. First off, I seriously doubt that we're going to see the removal of class locked characters. It's too foundational to how the Coalition set things up, and they might not think that it's going to be worth the effort to change it. And secondly, I just gotta end with one of my favorite statements that I've been saying since pre-launch, and that's, it's funny how the Coalition is making their life harder to do something that fans don't even want. Anyways, thanks for watching everyone. If you enjoyed this discussion and feel that we earned it, drop us a like down below. If you missed the other episodes in the series, you can find those down in the description. Thanks again everyone, and enjoy your holidays.